From hazardously deadly decorations to violent carolers, these are terrifying ancient Christmas traditions that we pray never return. Victorian-era Christmas cards were wild. Today's holiday cards feature cozy, pretty scenes of snow, reindeer, Santa, but back in the day, people were sending each other stuff like this. Yeah, Merry Christmas, here's a polar bear about to eat a guy's head. Or how about something like this? Yes, a man screaming in horror because he's transformed into an onion. Happy Christmas indeed. I love these cards. The artwork is fantastic, and they're just downright strange. But not only did these cards feature images that are creepy by modern standards, they must have been unsettling back then too. Intentionally so. I mean, there's some seriously surreal imagery here. Cards back then weren't just about sending well wishes, they were a statement. People in the Victorian area loved showing off their wealth and status, so sending a card wasn't just about the message inside, it was about starting a conversation. Some cards were so strange, they'd become a topic of discussion at parties. Christmas imagery wasn't as defined back then as it is now either. In fact, the entire idea of Christmas celebrations as we know them didn't really take hold until a bit later. So for Victorians, a Christmas card could feature anything from a cheerful holiday feast to whatever the hell this is. Now the cards are kind of cool, but here's something that's the opposite of cool. Putting lit candles right next to a dry, highly flammable tree sitting right in your living room. That can get hot real quick. Too hot. Sounds nuts, but people used to put candles on their Christmas trees, before light bulbs were a thing. And yeah, this caused some problems. The tradition of placing candles on Christmas trees started in the 17th century in Germany. Back then, families would light actual candles and attach them to branches of their Christmas trees. It was nice looking if you could avoid setting your house on fire. Unfortunately, that was a pretty big if. As you can imagine, live flames sitting on a tree would often lead to disastrous fires, turning your pleasant holiday get-together into a full-blown horror show. By 1908, insurance companies actually stopped covering Christmas tree fires altogether because it was just happening too much. Then came the light bulb, and suddenly the danger of burning down your house with your holiday decorations was a lot less likely. In 1882, Edward Johnson, a friend of Thomas Edison, decided to show off Edison's new invention by wiring electric light bulbs around his Christmas tree in New York City. It was an instant hit and made headlines, but even with the invention of electric lights, it still took a while for the average person to get on board with the idea. Light bulbs were expensive, and it required an electrician to safely set them up. It wasn't until the 1920s that electric Christmas tree lights became affordable and accessible to everyone, and that's when the old candle tradition finally went away for good. We've come here to claim our right, and if you don't open up your door, we'll lay it flat on the floor. Well, that sounds like a pleasant greeting. That's what I want to hear during the holiday season. Threats. Well, that's just one lyric early carolers would sing while going door to door back in the day. The word wassail comes from an old English phrase meaning be well or good health. It's also a spiced alcoholic drink, but wassailing was an old tradition, kind of the proto version of Christmas caroling, but a lot less pleasant at times. The tradition involved singing to bless apple orchards or homes. But there was a darker side. In some cases, the carolers demanded gifts or food in exchange for their blessing. Failure to provide offerings could result in a curse or a prank, and sometimes the carolers would become violent or aggressive if not treated well. Caroling was often expected, especially among the lower classes. The poor would travel through the wealthier neighborhoods singing in exchange for food, drink, or money. If the host didn't offer anything, some carolers weren't shy about turning things sour. In the early days of caroling, the groups of people who went door to door were sometimes rowdy, violent. In 16th century England, the Christmas feast was a lot different looking than it is now. Turkey, ham, how about a boar's head? Just the head. This was the centerpiece of upper-class Christmas dinners, and it came complete with a song dedicated to it. A whole feast built around a giant roasted boar's head, and guests singing to it. It wasn't some casual decoration. The boar's head was brought in with a whole ceremony, and to make it even more unsettling, they'd stick candles in its mouth, giving it the illusion of breathing fire. The tradition started as a display of wealth and power. Only the rich could afford to serve a whole boar, so it became a symbol of wealth. So serving just the head, well, why? They'd eat the rest of it eventually, but the head was kind of a statement. We can afford the whole boar, so we're gonna bring the head out on a plate and sing a song about it, turn it into a whole thing. A lot of imagery and traditions we practice at Christmas today have some pagan stuff mixed in. A lot of the stuff is very fun and festive, but there are elements of old traditions we've understandably left out like the Blót. So you're living in ancient Scandinavia, it's winter, things are rough, it's cold, you've got bad harvests, or maybe the gods are mad at you. So what's the solution? You hold a Blót. A Blót was a huge sacrificial ritual designed to win the favor of the gods and ensure that life would get a little better, whether it was better crops, better health, or just better weather. These ceremonies took place at key points in the year, around the solstices and equinoxes, so close to the winter solstice, spring equinox, summer solstice, and autumn equinox. People would gather in large groups on the estate of the local chief, and a bunch of animals would be sacrificed, mostly horses. Then the BLOOD of the animal would be sprayed on the people and around the temple or whatever sacred place they had using twigs. After that, they'd cook the meat from the sacrifices and bless it. The chief would hand out beers, and everyone would raise a toast to Odin, the other gods, and their ancestors. I like the latter part of that tradition. I'd just rather not be sprayed with animal guts right beforehand. Continuing with the Vikings though, when they made the switch over to Christianity, they went full on, which comes as no surprise, and their holiday celebrations took on a whole new meaning. The Vikings used to drink Yule ale to honor their Norse gods, but now the ale had to be blessed in the name of Christ and Saint Mary. This wasn't a suggestion, it was the law, and if you didn't brew and bless your Yule ale properly for 3 years straight, you could be banished from the country and lose everything you owned. Pretty high stakes for something as simple as brewing ale, but the Vikings were kind of famous for being hardcore. It was kind of cool that they incorporated their traditions into the new Christian faith, rather than just scrap their old ones entirely. Those who switched to Christianity didn't lose out on the big holiday celebrations, they just celebrated them in a new way. Christmas wasn't always celebrated on December 25th. It wasn't until over 300 years after Jesus' death that Pope Julius I officially picked that date. Before that, people marked Christ's birth on a few different days, March 29th, January 6th, or even sometimes in June. December 25th was chosen because it lined up nicely with the Roman festival of Saturnalia and the winter solstice. Saturnalia was a wild celebration filled with non-stop drinking and role reversals. So slaves and masters would swap places for the day, schools shut down, and the wealthy would give out gifts to the poor. Now, okay, that all sounds like good stuff, but this holiday would also get out of hand. It was a bit like a real-life ancient version of the Purge in some ways, in that no criminals would be punished, and that aspect of the holiday is something most of us will agree is best left in the past. This next strange tradition comes from medieval England. Back in the day, the church would pick a young boy, usually from the choir, to become the boy bishop during the Christmas season. He'd get all decked out in fancy bishop robes and would take charge of the church, even getting to lead services. Just kind of silly on the surface, but there was potential for things to go south. Some of these young guys didn't exactly follow the rules, and they could get a little carried away with their authority. There are stories of boy bishops causing chaos, ordering strange and sometimes very inappropriate things to happen. There are elements of this tradition today, but not to the level that it was back then. Next we have the Yule Cat from Icelandic folklore. This legend centers around a giant, terrifying cat that roams the streets during the Christmas season. If you didn't get new clothes before Christmas, it was said that the Yule Cat would come for you. This massive cat was said to eat people who didn't have new clothes, especially if you'd been lazy or hadn't worked hard enough during the year. It was a story told to get people to finish their work and earn their holiday gifts. The Yule Cat is still part of Icelandic traditions today, but the story was definitely more popular back in the day. How about instead of receiving gifts from a rotund, jolly man and his magical deer, you have a witch crawling down your chimney instead? This is the story of La Befana, the Italian Christmas witch. According to legend, the Christmas witch was a kind old woman who was invited by the 3 wise men to join them on their journey to visit baby Jesus, but she declined and then regretted it later. As punishment, she was condemned to travel the world delivering gifts to good children on January 5th. While she might leave candy or toys, youngsters who'd been naughty could end up with sticks, a lump of coal, or worse, a curse. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.